obviously everybody's trying to make their estimates, and a lot depends on how long this war will go on, and therefore the impact it's having now on food prices as well as fuel prices, and how much of impact it will have on the supply chain disruptions and so on growth. But I think depending on how long it will last, I think you will see slower growth. And for instance, our forecast team have been estimating that if we see high food and fuel prices last for 6 months to a year, this could mean growth could be 1% lower. So, but those are just still estimates. Our forecast will be coming out in another 2 weeks, including for regions and countries.
You mentioned food, and given the major role of Russia and Ukraine in the food supply chain, we have seen major disruptions in food, and this has caused significant increases in prices. Are we heading towards a global food crisis?
I think the situation, the last time we had a global food crisis was in 2008, where we actually had a shortage of production. This time is a bit different. We actually don't have a shortage of production. There's sufficient production of whether you want to talk about wheat, rice, or other grain products. The issue is about availability and affordability. And so I think the first message that we have been sharing with widely is that don't panic, in the sense that the food is available, but we shouldn't panic by imposing export restrictions or hoarding food supplies. We should make sure that the trade in agriculture products and food really continues to flow, so that we don't affect the availability, because the moment you start restricting, actually that's going to lead to another spike of food prices, or further worsening the food price situation. And the other component is that it's not just food, but agriculture inputs and fertilizer and inputs that go into fertilizer, which has also been affected by the Russian and Ukraine crisis, because they are main producers of these products. So we've got to make sure that trade in food and agriculture inputs are going to be also not impeded. So I think that's the first issue. And then the second issue is affordability, because the price has gone up. I think wheat went up by something like 70% in the last few weeks, and we don't know whether it's going to stay up depending on how long the war will last, and so on. But we know the price has gone up. So I think the other issue is affordability. How can we make sure that we can protect the poor and vulnerable households?
So what is needed exactly to mitigate the effect of this food crisis? What action plans should be done?
Well, basically, first of all, making sure that there are no trade barriers, meaning countries imposing export restrictions on their food exports, as well as fertilizer, because it's not just Ukraine. We're not talking about just Ukraine and Russia producing wheat and fertilizer. So making sure that trade remains open for food supplies as well as agriculture inputs is, I think, going to be key to addressing the availability of food, because we have enough food available.
When you're saying enough, like what's the level of global inventories right now? Do you have any figures?
I don't have figures, but I don't have the actual numbers, but according to our food and agriculture team, based on their estimates of the current levels of production as well as incoming production, they feel that there's enough food available. But we've just got to make sure that the available food can flow to the places that are in need of food and not impeded.
So you're going to provide loans to these countries. You have already provided loans to Ukraine.
Yes, we've already provided
900
fast support, 925 million to Ukraine directly for the humanitarian and economic impact because of the war. And we've also got requests from the neighboring countries which are receiving the refugees, and the countries that are affected directly because of remittances being cut due to the war and so on. And then you have the wider impact with food and fuel prices going up in many countries.
So we expect additional loans from the World Bank in that aspect to help mitigate the food security issues.
Loans, as well as if it's an IDA country, it can be grants or concessional loans, as well as we have emergency funding also through what we call our IDA scheme, which is the scheme for the poorest countries.
So how much is the situation more critical for the MENA region? You have a region that is the highest in the world in terms of importing food. You have a region that suffers from water scarcity, and also we had the climate change issues and drought. Some parts of the region were suffering from droughts that were not seen ever. So do you think that the situation is more critical in this region?
Yes, especially for wheat and the dependence on the imports from Ukraine and Russia. This region is more impacted than other regions. But I think Africa is impacted as well. But I think even in the MENA region, even before the current war in Ukraine, food prices were already going up because of drought, which is related to climate change impact. So I think this is something that is a longer term issue, not just because of the Ukraine war, but how do we ensure food security in a more sustainable way, whether it's diversification of sources of supply, or how can you make sure that within MENA region that whether it's the water issue or the land use issue and the whole sustainable agriculture and food security and production should be also in the short term and in the medium term be addressed, because food security and price shocks are something that's not going to go away even after we have resolved the current situation.